We begin at the Cooper Adventurer Academy during the Sacred Weapon Selection Ceremony. For the next 6 months, their chosen weapon will be their only partner.
A massive holographic screen flickered to life, displaying a vast arsenal, as the instructor urged them to choose swiftly, yet with great care.
The cadets scrambled, eagerly grabbing their destined arms, katanas, bows, enchanted gauntlets, you name it.
A frantic energy filled the room as they vied for the best weapons. But suddenly, one young man drew every eye, capturing the attention of students and instructors alike.
A wave of shock rippled through the hall as he reached out and selected a gun. They all thought he had completely lost his mind. Even the instructor questioned his sanity, asking if he was certain about this choice. When he confirmed it, the hall erupted in a symphony of mockery and laughter. You see, in this world of magic and monsters, firearms are considered the weapons of failures, utterly useless when most awakened beings can simply deflect bullets with their bare hands. But our protagonist had a reason for his bizarre choice. He knew the secret to unlocking this weapon's true, hidden potential.
Because he was the one who created this entire fantasy world. And now he was trapped inside it.
The novel our main character had poured his life into began like countless others. Dungeons and monsters had suddenly appeared all over the earth.
The world was thrown into chaos, and humanity was pushed to the very brink of extinction. South Korea became the epicenter of the apocalypse. But as always, heroes emerged, beings with extraordinary power who began to fight back and clear the dungeons. Hero guilds were formed, and with their combined strength,
South Korea was reborn as the most prosperous nation on Earth. And to train the next generation, an elite academy was established, the Cooper.
In this story, there was a protagonist and his rival. But our hero was reborn as neither of them.
So let's rewind a bit to see just how he ended up in this predicament.
Our author received a mysterious email one day, an offer to remake the very novel he wrote, The Hero's Return.
This fantasy novel by 𝐾𝐚𝐽 was a story he'd all but abandoned after suffering from severe writer's block for over half a year.
Have you ever started something you just couldn't bring yourself to finish?
Well, that was basically this guy's entire situation. Hajin wondered what the strange email could possibly mean. He figured a fan wanted him to rework the story, especially since he had stopped writing it altogether. The next day, he woke up inside his own novel as one of the cadets at the Cooper Academy. Inside the academy, the top-ranked first-year cadet was announced. This cheerful, blue-haired young man was 𝐾𝐚𝐽, and he was now the author's single greatest concern. He was watching his own creation come to life right before his eyes.
Yes, the world he had birthed had now consumed him, making him a part of its reality.
The Cooper Academy, the cadet named Suho. It all confirmed the horrifying truth. Baffled, the author couldn't fathom how he'd been dragged into his own novel.
But upon entering this world, it seemed the author had gained a strange power, a form of super-hearing. He could hear everyone in the crowd murmuring about 𝐾𝐚𝐽's rise to the top, their opinions both glowing and envious. But their gossip wasn't what concerned our new protagonist.
It was the fact that he could hear them all, loud and clear. The name 𝐾𝐚𝐽 echoed relentlessly in the author's mind.
Suho was the main protagonist of this novel, the hero of the world the author himself had created.
He was the one destined to lead this broken world into an era
of peace and harmony. A classic hero, he possessed a righteous heart and unending kindness.
But even more compelling was the dark secret Suho protected with his life, a hidden side to his heroic persona. But setting him aside for a moment,
Our nameless author focused his attention on Suho's fated rival.
the one who was destined to stand against him, igniting a rivalry of legendary proportions.
Stepping onto the stage, the second-ranked cadet was revealed, Shin Jong-hak. He was confident, one might even say, profoundly arrogant.
A typical rich kid. His father owned one of the most powerful corporations in the country. The author knew Jong-hak's immense talent would be a major obstacle for the protagonist, especially since he was destined to become a truly wicked villain.
Both main characters from his novel were standing right there before him.
In that moment, the author was absolutely certain this was his world, which raised a terrifying question.
If those two were the main characters, then what role was he meant to play in this story? Was he anything more than a background extra?
Well, he figured if he was going to be an inhabitant of his own novel, he should at least have a name.
His thoughts were cut short when another cadet called out to him. "Chundong, did you get any sleep last night?"
Okay, now the author had 1,000,000,000,000 questions.
He couldn't believe it. He had just been called Chundong.
The chubby young man confirmed he was the only Kim Chundong he knew. That name shattered our hero's expectations tenfold.
He, at least, hoped to be a key figure, someone with an important role to play, like in every other transmigration story.
But this Chundong was such a random nobody, he wasn't even written into the novel. Even he, the author, couldn't remember creating an extra as insignificant as his new identity.
So, he figured things might change if he could just see his own face.
Maybe that would jog his memory a bit, help him remember things more clearly.
The burning question in his mind was, who on earth was this Chundong? The most tragic part of this cruel joke was when the author realized his face was nothing more than a question mark.
He wasn't even important enough for the game to render him a unique face.
Faced with this absurd reality, the author was sent reeling from the shock, trying desperately to regain his composure.
And then a horrifying truth finally dawned on him. There's nothing worse than discovering your face is a literal question mark.
But get this, Chundong wasn't even a character he intended to put in the novel. His character had no special appearance, no unique name, and basically didn't exist where it mattered. Rejected by the very world he had created, the author faced despair, realizing that not even a crowd would notice his featureless form.
He was like an NPC, a total unknown that nobody would ever care about.
Inside Cube, he was the most average person imaginable, destined to never interact with the main characters or affect their story.
If you think you're not the main character of your own life,
Think again, and then try to imagine this poor guy's situation.
he was nothing more than a background character, or worse, just a placeholder to fill a slot in the game. Defeated, the author broke down, realizing he was nothing more than a worthless side character in his own novel. After some time, this faceless being started to adapt to his unique appearance, having endured it for 2 weeks.
14 days had passed, and nothing had changed. He still had the same facial ambiguity as when he started.
2 weeks had confirmed it. This wasn't just a dream. He had actually been transported inside his own novel.
Every word of this novel was his own creation. And now, he was walking among the very characters he had brought to life.
The character Kim Chun-dong was one of many extras in the novel, though Ha-jin was now possessing his body.
As one would expect,
Ha-jin tried countless ways to piece together information and find an explanation for how he'd ended up in this mess.
but his research was a complete dead end, leaving him clueless as to how he got here or who was responsible. Moreover, he was wondering how to ensure his own survival in this world, especially with no hope of returning to his home planet.
Ha-jin estimated that it would take a decade until they reached the point in the story where he had stopped writing.
But this thought constantly gnawed at him. The horror of surviving for 10 years in a strange world as a complete nobody was terrifying for Ha-jin. His faceless appearance didn't help either.
Ha-jin grieved for the life he'd lost and didn't want to be trapped in a novel that wasn't even finished.
An exhausted Ha-jin decided once again to find a way to reverse his transmigration. The only loophole, the only escape he could see, was to catch up with the events of the main story. After all, there was a chance he could be freed. The author thought that if he could just hold on until the story was half finished, he would be okay.
It wasn't like he had any other options to salvage his situation. So this question mark-faced NPC decided that's exactly what he would do.
But to achieve his goal, he would have to relive life as a high school student all over again. Let's shift our focus to Cube and explore what makes it so special. It's an artificial island that nurtures the best hero cadets to lead the future generation. It's like a miniature society with 50,000 residents. The city is a prime example of innovation and progress, reflecting humanity's top-tier magical and industrial skills. Cube was the sole reason South Korea was considered a superpower in this novel. Standing before the Hero Training Center, Ha-jin thought that this was the main stage of his novel, where everything important would happen. It was a magnificent blue structure, where heroes honed their special skills. The superpowers in Ha-jin's novel are called gifts, and as you'd expect, every hero has one. However, only the best of the best, only the absolute elite are granted the privilege of studying here, and that included Chun-dong, the boy whose body Ha-jin now possessed. This boy was supposedly a student at Cooper, which meant he had to have some kind of talent. The problem was, Ha-jin knew nothing about his abilities. It was like starting from scratch, unsure if he even had any power to begin with. As the author, he was at least confident that Chun-dong had some connection to this training center. He had to find any resource he could get his hands on. It was his only chance of surviving this terrifying school and its vicious students. Ha-jin stepped into Veritas class, the very heart of the Cooper Training Center. This place was a melting pot of characters, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the ugly. He saw Dong-hak, and even the novel's main character, X-Who. Soon, all these figures would diverge onto their own paths, facing their own destined events. And that was bound to stir up trouble. Ha-jin took his seat, a feeling of dread washing over him. 10 years. He had to survive a decade with these same people. Worse, he didn't even have a proper face to greet them with. For the author, this was the worst possible outcome imaginable. After class, the students all returned to their dorms. Ha-jin was no exception, though he had no words to describe the day he just had. He couldn't even fathom how he'd managed to focus in class, feeling like a freshman all over again. Suddenly,
a delivery box caught his eye. This was a shock, even to the author himself. He'd never written a delivery system into this world.
As he opened the box, 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. Could these be Chen-Dong's personal belongings? But to his utter astonishment, it was his very own laptop. The sight was so absurd, it didn't feel real.
An object like this had no business existing here.
The laptop booted up, revealing a system screen that began to sync with him. Startled, 𝐿 dropped it, watching as the display announced it was synchronizing with Chen-Dong.
The system downloaded all the necessary settings and displayed a series of stats: strength, intelligence, and even things like luck.
And what's more,
They were the exact settings that Kim Ha-jin himself had written. Questions flooded his mind, but before he could process them, his body began to transform, as the sync finally completed.
The screen went dark, then informed Ha-jin he'd gained the Setting Intervention ability. Chen-Dong's featureless body reshaped into Ha-jin's true form, completely resetting his stats.
Ha-jin's reality had been rewritten once again. This time, when he looked in the mirror, a real face stared back, not the mocking question mark from before.
But this was where things got even more complicated. Dozens of system windows materialized from thin air, and Ha-jin had no idea what any of them meant.
The system confirmed his synchronization was complete.
He wondered, could this be related to the special process known as enlightenment? You see, enlightenment is an awakening that occurs when one surpasses their own limits.
That's what it was called in this world. And Ha-jin knew, because he was the one who wrote that ability into existence. After enlightenment, a person's gifts, powers, and skills are all converted into a digital format. This allows them to access their abilities with ease, but the real key was the potential for growth his body now possessed. Having experienced enlightenment, Ha-jin was now able to grow exponentially stronger. In simple terms, Ha-jin could now see his own status window, which detailed his various stats and abilities. One of his powers was the rather basic observation skill. The same went for his second skill, reading. His stats were also displayed before him, though they were insignificant and painfully mediocre. Ha-jin decided to examine each status screen one by one. The most interesting was the synchronization tab, the very thing that reverted him from Chen-Dong to his original body and triggered the reset. What he saw on the screen was beyond his wildest imagination.
Although he didn't understand how it happened, Ha-jin believed the synchronization was responsible for his changed face and appearance.
There was also the hard truth that his personal stats were far weaker than Chen-Dong's, who was supposed to be a student here. But instead of raw stats, he received points to compensate for his shortcomings.
Putting that aside for now, Ha-jin focused on the unique authority window. Apparently, he possessed the ability to create new items by spending something called SP.
Doing so would consume his SP gauge, but it could unlock a world of new possibilities for him. Story points could only be obtained as the plot progressed, and his importance within it grew. The strange thing was, Ha-jin couldn't remember ever writing anything about story points in his novel. He quickly realized the truth. He had to increase his own importance in the story, to influence the plot, and earn those story points as a reward. He began to piece together his true purpose in this world. The only reason he could access his laptop and these status screens was because this body was destined to endure a hellish gauntlet of monster battles, ultimately altering the main storyline. This was far from an ideal outcome, and so
𝐒𝐻𝐚 was ready to curse the very world he had created. But just as he muttered his frustrations, another window materialized, surprising the author. It was labeled Hidden Information.
Trapped in this predicament, 𝐻𝐻𝐚 despaired, knowing he had to interfere with his own creation for even a glimmer of hope of returning home.
He stood up, his fingers beginning to fly across the laptop's keyboard.
With no other choice, 𝐻𝐻𝐚 knew it was better to act now than to wait for the story to reach the point where his novel had abruptly ended. Besides, there was no guarantee he'd even return to his old world if he made it that far. The author figured that even if this hidden information wasn't about returning home,
it could still hold a crucial clue for navigating this world, perhaps making it easier to interact with the main characters. To achieve his goal, 𝐻𝐻𝐚's only option was to fight and grow stronger.
He began allocating his points, aiming to outlive the original story and whatever fate had in store. Speaking of leveling up, 𝐻𝐻𝐚 recalled that his novel didn't have a free stat distribution system. The cliché leveling nonsense from other stories didn't apply here. The only method was to use these points, making them invaluable to their user. The best strategy was to pour everything into luck. It was the only stat without a hard cap, and it always provided some kind of benefit. It boosted everything, from money and rewards to even personal relationships. It was the ultimate stat anyone could wish for to improve their daily life. Essentially, it was a cheat code. But for an abstract stat like luck, points couldn't be used to directly enhance its effect. This led 𝐻𝐻𝐚 to wonder if he could somehow manipulate his luck stat by converting his points into product points. To test his theory, he decided to confirm the conversion of 10 points. As a result, they were converted into 10,000 product points. 𝐻𝐻𝐚 immediately used 9,000 of them on his luck stat, raising it by 9 points. Just then, the mysterious luck ability activated and took effect, slightly boosting his luck stat by an additional point. This meant his passive luck was affecting itself, making it a truly worthwhile investment. Next, 𝐻𝐻𝐚 turned his attention to the main character's stats. Suho's magic power was a mighty 9, but it was capped at that level. 𝐻𝐻𝐚 had just shattered that barrier by raising his own luck to 9.1. With his remaining story points, he decided to focus on perseverance to survive the facility's brutal training regimen. Thanks to the boost in his luck stat, it also gave him a significant bonus to his perseverance as he raised it with points. He was already feeling grateful as his investment showed promising results. But suddenly, the system glitched, displaying a glaring warning screen. His interference with probability had caused an error. Because 𝐻𝐻𝐚 was essentially cheating, the system generated a restriction to close this loophole. He could no longer manipulate his abstract stats using story points. The author was a bit annoyed, knowing that without this restriction, he would have been completely overpowered. 𝐻𝐻𝐚 realized he had reached the limit of his tricks, but even so, he had raised both luck and perseverance high enough to overcome many of the story's hurdles. A new thought crossed his mind. He'd received 10,000 story points as a newcomer bonus. Those points had to be used wisely, and 𝐻𝐻𝐚 needed to think carefully about where to invest them. So, for now, he decided to save them.
their professor introduced himself. Kim Soo-hyuk would be their instructor for the coming year.
He was globally recognized as one of the most talented heroes, ranked 5th in the association's mid-tier class.
Finishing his introduction, the man got straight to the point.
He stated that this facility, known as Cube, wasn't some luxury resort. The only currency that mattered here were the cadets' scores.
This meant that if they failed to meet and maintain the standard, they would be expelled.
Maintaining those scores would be no easy task, as only half of the cadets ever survived the program without dropping out.
This facility existed to forge the next generation of heroes. Therefore, their evaluation criteria would be merciless.
The instructor ordered the cadets to their feet and to follow him. Their first order of business, deciding on a main weapon for each cadet.
Stepping into the armory, a stunned silence fell upon the cadets, their eyes fixed on the beautiful, yet terrifying, arsenal.
Their awe was shattered by the stern instructor, who reminded them this was no time for sightseeing, and ordered them to choose their weapons at once. He also gave them a critical piece of advice. Once a weapon is chosen,
they would be unable to change it for at least 6 months. A single mistake now meant being shackled to a useless tool for half a year.
Kim Soo-ho, the novel's original main character, was naturally drawn to a sword, a sense of satisfaction washing over him as he gripped its hilt.
One of the girls selected a bow, certain she was destined to be an archer. Another, a blonde cadet, chose a rapier for its precise, deadly strikes.
The other cadets followed suit, choosing various weapons like whips and other armaments. The author, Ha-jin, observed this, thinking how most protagonists simply pick their weapons without a second thought.
But he couldn't just stand by and watch. He had to choose a weapon for himself. As he weighed his options, Ha-jin knew he had to be extremely careful. For him, even the slightest miscalculation could prove disastrous.
His current stats were pathetically low, meaning he couldn't possibly compete with the others using swords or spears. Defensive shields were also out. To simplify things, Ha-jin decided to set a few conditions for his selection.
The first condition was that the weapon had to be from his previous world. The second was that he had to be able to adapt to it easily.
Considering those two critical factors,
Ha-jin finally made his decision. His choice immediately drew the bewildered stares of every other cadet, including their instructor.
The teacher was baffled and asked Ha-jin if the handgun he held was truly the weapon he was choosing.
It was a comical sight, like someone bringing a gun to a sword fight and declaring they'll handle things the American way.
Ha-jin felt the full force of his instructor's piercing gaze.
The man was confused, remembering this cadet had registered as a sword user at the academy. Ha-jin quickly scrambled for an excuse.
He simply told the instructor that he'd had a change of heart. A surprisingly simple reason the man had to accept.
Still, he couldn't understand why Ha-jin would switch his specialty upon entering the academy. He confirmed the choice, as cadets at Cube forge their own destiny.
With a touch of disappointment, he advised Ha-jin to remember that the responsibility for his fate now rested solely on his own shoulders.
Suddenly, the author's super hearing ability activated at full power. He could hear the whispers of the other cadets, mocking him for choosing a gun. None of them could fathom why he'd use a firearm in an academy meant to train elite heroes. Some even wondered if they should offer him advice during combat practice, writing him off as nothing more than an attention seeker. But despite their jeers, Ha-jin knew the truth. Even in this world, guns were incredibly reliable. They were the perfect weapon for ordinary people who lacked magical powers, and the bullets used here were a special type.
Magic bullets, infused with mana, created a devastatingly powerful shot,
far more destructive than any normal round. However, that was the gun's only real advantage.
The reason they were seen as a terrible choice and overlooked was because they had absolutely no potential for growth.
This was proven by powerful heroes who could easily crush a magic bullet with their bare hands.
𝐿 knew the core limitation of magic bullets was that their destructive power was always fixed, regardless of the user.
The second reason related to their very nature. They possessed a weak origin and formation.
This world was different from the real one, as myths and legends could actually materialize.
These legends and relics were shaped into weapons, granting the wielder a tremendous advantage in battle.
The more ancient the origin, the greater the formation, which in turn raises the weapon's rank. This was the most important factor in its effectiveness.
For that reason, no cadet would ever choose a modern, newly created weapon. They had weak origin points due to their modern creation.
Older, medieval weapons were always preferred and were generally far more powerful. Instead of relying on the fixed damage of a magic bullet, they relied on personal skill, using their weapon's power to skyrocket their own growth and overcome their limits. But everything 𝐿 had considered so far was basically useless for him. He had nothing to gain from it, and he certainly wasn't the main character of this story.
He didn't know how to use a sword, and he believed his close combat skills would be far worse than the other cadets.
As he internalized his thought process,
𝐿 believed he had chosen the gun for a very good reason.
He knew that mastering this weapon would effectively help him earn story points, because using a gun would guarantee he'd stand out from the rest.
The more crucial he was to the plot, the more story points he would gain. That was his entire strategy.
Now, with his weapon choice settled, his next major concern was acquiring a talent.
In this world, a talent was a special ability, so extraordinary that it was considered a superpower. It was said that each person could only possess a single talent, but a select few individuals were exempt from this universal rule.
Take the story's protagonist, Suho, who hadn't even awakened his talent yet, but already wielded the skills of a sword saint. The scene shifts to Suho, catching up with Noon for a training session.
Suho's carefree attitude only enraged Noun. She couldn't understand how a guy like him managed to be at the top of their class.
Suho changed the subject, mentioning that there was another top-ranked student in their class besides him.
Noin was confused at first, but then it clicked. He was talking about 𝐿. The mere mention of his name made her face twist in disgust. That's because this cadet, 𝐿, was a complete joke to be called a top student. Noon couldn't fathom how he was taken seriously while carrying a tiny, short-ranged pistol. She figured he must have given up on becoming a hero and was just clinging to a foolish weapon. Noon wondered if this was all part of 𝐿's master plan to drop out of the academy. But hearing her words, Suho couldn't help but call her out for being so quick to judge the situation. Noin had no idea what he was rambling about, and shot him a confused look. She snapped at him for wasting her time, instead of getting on with practice. While they were busy talking trash about 𝐿, he was in class dozing off, wondering if he earned points every time someone bad-mouthed him.
That's a really good question, actually. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Now, back to our boy.
𝐿 reflected on how the story's protagonist, Suho,
was destined to become the greatest hero of all time by using his one unique gift.
This meant that gifts were just as vital for 𝐿. He couldn't afford to waste the opportunity to acquire his first one. Using his notebook, 𝐿 literally wrote a new gift for himself, Master Sharpshooter. It was an ability that granted him pinpoint accuracy with long-range weapons. The moment he finished writing his new power into existence, 10,000 points were deducted from his account. The world system was so advanced that it automatically modified everything else to fit the new reality, granting him multiple perks for his new skill, like bullet time. This skill wasn't just useful for his gun, but for all ranged weapons. This meant 𝐿 could now master the bow as well. On top of all that, it was a growth-type skill. So, while it might seem underwhelming now, he could always nurture it and grow its power. In the long run, this was a priceless investment. 𝐿 decided it was best to make the most of what he had. And with his preparations complete, he felt ready for whatever was coming next. With the unique talent he had forged, his only option was to bet everything on it and survive until the main story concluded. The scene cuts to their classroom, where a teacher is lecturing on strategies for how cadets should approach towers and dungeons. The most ironic part was 𝐿 realizing the explanations from the lecture were the very same ones he had written in his novel, now printed in their textbooks. Imagine taking a class on material that you yourself created. 𝐿 had an easy time just enjoying the lecture, since there was nothing new for him to learn. He was actively using his observation and reading talent to help. Let's break down these two abilities. Observation allowed him to perceive everything in his sight. He could see through objects and even read the text on his laptop from across the room. The instructor told them to review the lecture material, as their written exam was about to begin. 𝐿 was burning with frustration. She was bored out of her mind and couldn't stand another second of the lecture. Suddenly, the Veritas class was interrupted by an instructor ordering all cadets to assemble at the plaza. Hearing this, 𝐿 was ecstatic to be free from the boring class. It was finally time for practical training, a subject our boy 𝐿 was not looking forward to. When they arrived at the training arena, the instructor explained that everyone should already know the day's agenda. First, they would be forming teams of 4 cadets, each consisting of 2 warriors, 1 marksman, and finally, 1 support member. Furthermore, these teams would be fixed until the midterm exams. All teams were balanced between high-ranking and low-ranking students to ensure a fair competition. The instructor told them to find their teammates immediately. 𝐿 glanced at the team roster, shocked to see that he wasn't on Suho's or 𝐿's team. Worst of all, he was stuck on a team with the one person he wanted to avoid the most. That person was 𝐿, which made a look of pure disbelief cross his face. Everything was happening exactly as it did in the novel. Many characters are written specifically to interact with a story's protagonist, creating events and pushing the narrative forward. However, among all those characters, Yuon was truly in a league of her own. She had stunning violet hair and was the star pupil of Korea's most powerful guild, Essence of the Strait. Furthermore, as the successor to the prestigious Yu clan, her background was nothing short of impeccable. In the original novel, Suho was destined to clash with Yosan at first, but would eventually earn her trust, becoming comrades and a core pillar of his team. And for that very reason, it was critical for 𝐿 to get closer to Yuon. Interacting with her would grant him more story points, making him essential to the plot.
With a look of sheer determination, 𝐒𝐿 was ready to do whatever it took to grab Yuan's attention and get involved with her.
Yuan's team members arrived to greet her. With her and 𝐒𝐿, Ho-Sung and Hazuki completed the planned 4-person cell.
Being both meticulous and calculating, Yuan initially considered brushing them off, but ultimately accepted them as her teammates for the mission.
Amusingly, she adopted a formal and open-minded attitude the moment she decided to acknowledge them.
Her 2 other teammates found her demeanor a bit strange, but Yuan's attention quickly shifted to the final member of their group. 𝐒𝐿 stepped forward, making his presence known.
Though a bit intimidated, he knew that if he didn't project confidence, Yuan would immediately write him off.
Ho-Sung broke the tension, immediately calling him the show-off who had chosen a gun as his weapon.
The guy was busy rambling carelessly, completely unaware that their instructor was about to blow a gasket over his foolish chatter.
Ho-Sung practically jumped out of his skin as the instructor roared, ordering them to move out for the monster hunting mission. The instructions were sent to each team's smartwatch. Our team set out, moving through a wide open grain field.
Yuan checked her smartwatch. It indicated they were close to the target. She wanted the team braced and ready for what was coming.
Further details about the monster would be revealed once they reached the location.
But while they sprinted ahead with ease, our poor protagonist was seriously struggling. He needed a monumental source of motivation, having never run this much in his entire life. Even though his stamina stat was above average, he could barely keep up with his team. What's worse, these guys weren't even considered elite.
They were just the accepted average standard for a cube cadet. Yuan and the others came to a halt, realizing they'd arrived at the target location. This area of the map was known as Coast 8 of the training zone.
Up ahead was a boat where a monster was expected to appear.
Speaking of our hideous beast, the black pustule octopus emerged, swallowing the boat whole with its gigantic tentacles.
Before confronting the monster head-on, Yuan believed it was best to share their battle tactics and coordinate their plan.
The monster they faced was a mid-low-grade creature, and its physical attacks were known to be surprisingly weak.
The real problem was the pustules protruding from the creature's head.
It was explained that the black pustule octopus detects danger and shoots out smaller octopi to attack its enemies, and these spawn were no joke. They were bloodthirsty monsters, and every single one was dangerous enough to turn a human into a dried-up mummy.
Ho-Sung suggested they immediately target the mini-octopi once the battle began.
The girl, Hazuki, believed they'd need a marksman to handle the small octopi with a gun. Naturally, she thought 𝐒𝐿 was the best fit for the job.
However, strongly opposing the idea, Yuan declared that she would handle the octopus spawn herself instead. She wanted the rest of the team to conserve their abilities until she was done, thinking they'd need to destroy the main monster in a single blow due to its super-fast regeneration.
Yuan's sudden dismissal of 𝐒𝐿's contribution felt incredibly strange to him.
He immediately realized she was simply ignoring him, not even believing he was worthy of participating in this training exercise.
Yuan asked if the remaining team members were ready.
She signaled the start of the operation, leaving our boy slightly ticked off by her damn attitude.
The black pustule octopus unleashed its destructive power, smashing the boat, while Ho-Sung used his battle axe to draw the creature's attention.
His thunderous roars were enough to provoke the octopus and lure it closer to the shore. Enraged, the monster lunged toward Ho-Sung, unleashing its power. The poor guy was scared to death by its size and ran for his life.
Hazuki prepared herself, while our boy Hajin also nervously gripped a Glock.
The only determined warrior among them was Yuan, a whip user, who was ready to take down the monster in an instant. Just as they planned, the creature sensed the imminent danger, unleashing a swarm of its spawn from the pustules on its crown.
A wave of panic washed over Ho-Sung as he realized their horrifying truth. He was the primary target.
The miniature assassin surged forward, ready to tear him to shreds. But before they could strike, Yu-Yan stepped forth like a warrior queen, her whip cleaving through the wretched creatures. She stood defiantly before the monster, her sheer power leaving her teammates completely stunned.
After all, Yu-Yan's combat prowess alone had earned her the rank of 7th strongest among all the first-year cadets.
She created an opening for Ho-Sung, shouting for him to run while she held off the beast alone. Yu-Yan's whip danced through the air, enraging the octopus, which retaliated with a furious sweep of its tentacles.
She dodged the attack with breathtaking agility. But as she hung in mid-air, a smaller spawn crept up from her blind spot, ready to strike.
Hazuki screamed out a warning. "Behind you! Watch out!"
Before Yu-Yan could even react, the creature was blasted out of the air by a long-range weapon. The shot stunned her. There was only one explanation. Hajin's gun had just saved her life.
The fact that he'd saved her was infuriating, but Yu-Yan finally acknowledged his existence by muttering his name.
Now, let's briefly touch upon the mechanics of story points. As stated before, they can be exchanged for stat points.
They also increase as Hajin's importance to the main characters and the overall narrative grows.
But for a character designed to be a mere background extra, standing out is an almost impossible feat.
The main characters, by their very nature, were meant to dominate the entire story.
Therefore, the only way for Hajin to become significant was to intervene and directly aid the protagonist's story arcs, just as he did by saving Yu-Yan.
That single, perfectly timed shot sent shockwaves through the entire team.
Yu-Yan, momentarily distracted, snapped at him to remember his place, not expecting an extra to interfere in the raid.
But in that moment of distraction, the giant octopus spawned even more miniature versions of itself. Yu-Yan prepared to fight, but this time several of them were targeting Hajin.
For the novel's original author, however, this was hardly a difficult battle.
He could read their attack patterns as if they were an open book. Hajin closed his eyes, focusing his entire being to achieve peak performance. He activated one of his unique skills, bullet time. It was a special talent the system had created and modified just for him.
Using it slowed his perception of time for 3 full seconds.
It was more than enough time for Hajin to become a legendary marksman and gun down these ugly beasts with ease. After locking on to every target, he unleashed an absolute tempest of gunfire.
When those 3 seconds came to an end, Hajin had already fired upon every single creature, even those that had been targeting Yu-Yan.
As normal time resumed, his bullets flew true, blasting each octopus into the wall. In that instant, Yu-Yan saw her chance, a clear shot at the main body's head. Lashing out with her whip, she bound the creature's pustules and ordered her team to attack.
Ho-Sung and Hazuki acted at once, releasing a combined torrent of magic that annihilated the monster with one powerful, focused strike.
The black pustule octopus was finally defeated, its hideous brain splattering across the shore.
Completely spent,
𝐒𝐻𝐚 collapsed in classic dramatic fashion. The team's results were then calculated. A clear time of just under 1 hour.
It was far from the best time, but it still earned them 16th place on the leaderboard.
And with that, the first monster round was officially over. Their subjugation time placed them 16th out of 100 teams. Yu Yan was shocked when she saw the results. Their entire battle had been recorded by a drone for monitoring purposes.
They could use the data to analyze their mistakes and improve for the future.
Although 16th place was an achievement, for someone of Yu Yan's caliber, it felt like a crushing defeat. She had expected a much higher rank.
She became even more envious, seeing that Nayun had easily surpassed her in both individual and team scores, ranking 4th out of 100 teams.
While she had intended to widen the gap between their two families,
Yu Yan couldn't believe she had been left so far behind. To make matters worse, there was Donghak, that arrogant jerk who seemed to have a crush on Nayun, staring at her from afar.
Now, absolutely seething, Yu Yan marched towards Nayun with barely restrained rage.
But in a comical twist, she masked her fury with a sickeningly sweet smile, acting like a fake friend.
She tried to fish for information about Nayun's team performance. But Nayun was just as annoyed, frustrated that they had only placed 4th, because she wanted to beat Donghak.
Yu Yan confessed that she had placed 16th.
Her outward expression was calm and stoic, but inside, a volcano of rage was about to erupt.
But Nayun was genuinely surprised that Yu Yun's team managed to get 16th place with a failure like 𝐻𝐻𝐚 holding them back.
Ultimately, she believed he was the reason they were stuck in the low ranks, but Yanha knew the real truth.
She treated him like trash because his abysmal stamina cost them 50 minutes just to get into position.
If he were faster, they could have arrived in 10 minutes and cleared the mission in a fraction of the time. But despite that, his performance had left a deep impression on her.
He was a massive help during their fight against the monster horde.
Yana vividly recalled how he gunned down every single creature with his pistol before they even had a chance to close in.
Yana wondered if such a feat was even possible with ordinary magic bullets. 𝐻𝐻𝐚 made it look so effortless, yet so powerful.
Suddenly, her complete lack of interest in him had transformed. Now, Yanha was intensely curious about this boy's true identity. As for our main character, 𝐻𝐻𝐚, he had just finished a brutal training session. You can bet he was pushing himself to build his stamina after what happened.
The author explains that he'd forgotten to check his notifications since he started training, and wondered just how many points he'd earned.
Because his luck stat always helps him reach his maximum potential. His accuracy in annihilating monsters had skyrocketed. His talent had also evolved.
Now, every shot would land as a critical hit. 𝐻𝐻𝐚's senses, like his sight and hearing, were also sharpened. Yet his story points had only increased by 27.
Recalling his performance during the monster wave, 𝐻𝐻𝐚 concluded that his luck stat must have played a huge role in earning him those product points. His master plan to get involved with Yanha was proceeding smoothly, netting him the points he desperately needed. His physical stats had also soared thanks to his relentless training. Strength, stamina, and vitality had all been enhanced, and were further amplified by his insane luck. Since 𝐻𝐻𝐚 had raised his stats this much, he decided to call it a day and head back. Back in her dorm room, Yana was meticulously reviewing the combat footage from the monster wave. She was especially captivated
by Ha-Jin's insane marksmanship, unloading 60 rounds in just 3 seconds with a single pistol.
For comparison, Yanha tried to imagine firing 20 rounds in 1 second.
To her, achieving that with a handgun seemed completely impossible. This led her to wonder if he was using some kind of special automatic pistol. She then moved on to his physical stats.
Ha-Jin's agility was incredible, but his vitality and physical strength were pathetically low compared to the other cadets.
On top of all that, he'd suddenly switched his weapon during the selection ceremony. Yonha's sharp intuition was screaming that something was very wrong. She couldn't even recall seeing this guy at the military academy.
While she was lost in thought, Yonha received a message from Dong-hak, a boy she seemed to have a crush on. She told him she was busy analyzing footage.
Yonha wanted to see if she'd struck gold with her team, as she had grand plans to one day take over the top guild in Korea.
But Dong-hak was surprised, doubting that anyone on her team was noteworthy or special. More importantly, he wanted to know about the mysterious gunman, whose performance was the only thing that piqued Dong-hak's curiosity.
A smile spread across her face. Yanha was thrilled that her crush was finally showing some interest in her.
She casually remarked that he did okay for his rank, which, by the way, was somewhere in the 900s among the cadets.
Dong-hak was stunned and asked if Ha-Jin just got lucky. Yonha paused on that comment, wondering if Ha-Jin's display truly was just a fluke, and if he was, in fact, incredibly lucky.
The footage ends there. So let's shift to a new scene.
We're at the guild building, known as the Sacred Grace of God. Here, the Vice Guildmaster is obsessed with Suho's brilliant performance. The footage of his battle, which stood out from all the others, had captivated Sunga, the guild's second-in-command. She marveled at Suho's perfect, precise movements and his unparalleled swordsmanship, the likes of which she'd never seen before. Suho had achieved such perfection that he appeared to be enjoying a light, graceful dance. Yet his furious slashes had the power to cut through space itself. All 3 of Korea's top guilds now had their eyes on this young prodigy. They were determined to recruit him for his overwhelming power. Sunga was among them, wanting to sign him as soon as possible, especially since he was currently a free agent. Her next subject of interest, shockingly, was Ha-Jin. She was baffled that the boy would choose a pistol of all weapons. Her assistant confirmed that he had stirred up considerable interest within the guild community. Many had rewatched the footage because Yana was on his team, and they originally wanted to see her performance. But the hottest topic on all the forums was how he fired 60 bullets from a non-automatic pistol in 3 seconds. It made absolutely no logical sense. Because even accounting for his extreme agility, Ha-Jin's handgun should never have been able to withstand that much recoil in such a short time. His talent was shrouded in such mystery and allure that some had begun to call him an anomaly. The vice president also knew he had switched his main weapon from a sword to a pistol right after entering the prestigious academy. Sunga realized he was a person who had experienced an awakening. A phenomenon where one's special talent or ability suddenly manifests. Of course, there's no telling what kind of talent will be revealed. Because of this, some cadets switch weapons after their awakening, finding their new talent incompatible with their old style. However, this situation was known to be a devastating setback in a cadet's career, causing them to fall behind by at least 3 years in terms of progress. That's why the military academy encourages cadets to master various weapons, rather than relying on just one.
Sung-ah couldn't fathom how the boy became an awakened warrior at the young age of 17.
But she figured his talent must be limited if it was only related to guns.
Still, she thought he was worthy enough to be considered a potential prospect.
Sung-ah quickly changed her mind, deciding it was best to let Ha-jin's talent fully reveal itself before they tried to recruit him.
She wanted to see if he would truly live up to her expectations of being an anomaly. Today was Wednesday, which meant a training session was underway.
Suho was currently facing another cadet in a perfectly even-matched duel.
This part of the curriculum was known as sparring practice.
It was usually done in teams of 2, using only training weapons for easy evaluation, with little to no injury. However, for Kim Ha-jin, he was being berated for having the worst performance.
The poor guy had a passive skill, but he was also the unluckiest person in the world.
He was the only cadet who had to face his instructor instead of a fellow student. As a result, he had already lost 18 times in a row.
The real problem with this session was that the training guns weren't ready for use yet.
This meant using a real gun would obviously cause injury if he faced another cadet. That's why the instructor himself took responsibility for handling Ha-jin.
The poor boy was suffering and begging to surrender, but his pathetic cries were ignored by the teacher.
The man prepared to unleash a devastating punch right to his face.
But just before the blow could land, Ha-jin dodged the critical strike, which was powerful enough to crack the ground. His teacher was stunned that he had avoided the attack. Ha-jin proceeded to evade 2 more punches from him, making the instructor realize that while he looked like a trash-tier cadet with terrible posture, he actually possessed godlike eyes to track his attacks.
1,000-mile eyes, another skill Ha-jin acquired as part of his Eyes of God gift.
It sharpened his senses and allowed him to read an opponent's attack trajectory, helping Ha-jin casually dodge every single blow. It was true, he could see the attacks coming, but the hard part was forcing his body to actually dodge them.
The other cadets watched his performance, judging it to be clumsy and lazy.
The whole group was probably mocking him for being a failure, but it still earned him 40 story points. So in a way, he was getting exactly what he wanted. Still, he hated being the laughingstock. After the grueling session, Ha-jin relaxed with a refreshing drink.
As he glanced to his right, he saw Yanha walking past.
She wore a look of disgust, as if she saw him as nothing more than a low-life nobody. It was ironic, considering he was the author who wrote her personality in the first place.
Feeling experimental today, he decided to call out Yana's name before tossing her a can of water.
Her reflexes kicked in as she caught it. Then she asked with a confused glare if he was trying to pick a fight.
His approach was so terrible, she actually thought he was trying to attack her.
Ha-jin explained that he was just trying to express his gratitude for her help in advancing their training.
In his mind, this may seem like a simple test, but it was a crucial one. He wanted to see how many story points he could get from a simple interaction with one of the story's main characters. After all, he usually only got 40 points from side characters.
Yonha tossed the can back at him and warned the fool not to call her so informally.
A first warning he knew he shouldn't take lightly. As she turned away, a smirk spread across Ha-jin's face. He had gotten what he came for.
As Yanha was carrying her bag out, she felt confused when it seemed heavier than before.
Noticing the subtle change, she opened it up, only to find another can of water inside.
Our sly author
had been sneaky enough to place a second can in her bag, much to her annoyance.
She wanted to crush the can, but then remembered that an innocent can of water had done nothing wrong. When it came to Yona, she loved common foods like bread, burgers, and cup noodles.
However, no one had ever seen her buy such things herself, all because of her family's prestigious reputation. This entire experiment hinged on 𝐿 exploiting a side of her personality, one that no one else was ever meant to see.
Besides, he wouldn't earn many points from simple small talk, pushing him to take action in the main story's events.
Because he already knew exactly what was about to happen. 𝐿 was certain that Jin's ambush at the National Arms Museum was imminent. Jinns are malevolent entities who have forged pacts with a demon. They are granted a staggering amount of power in exchange for their very souls, becoming puppets for their demonic masters. The impending incident would be the work of a single Jinn. This creature was currently lurking inside the museum, aiming to eliminate a specific target. Ultimately, the Jinn is defeated by Suho and the other main characters, who just happen to be at the event. Through this incident, Suho earns the recognition and respect of the other heroes. The key players in this battle would be Suho and Na-yoon, who would fight the Jinn head-on. The villain wouldn't be too hard to handle, since this event happens at the very start of the novel. It was, in fact, Suho's first real enemy. Knowing what fate had in store, 𝐿 schemed for a way to interfere. While he was trying to find a way into the museum, one of the instructors yelled at him for loitering outside the dorms.
𝐿 decided to grab his laptop and leave. At that same moment, he received a critical, yet unrevealed, system message.
The academy was home to numerous clubs for extracurricular activities. Cadets could sign up for a group where they would organize their own independent activities. Among those clubs were academics, martial arts, and even simple hobbies like painting and music. Hundreds of clubs existed inside Cube.
Perhaps the greatest benefit was that they not only provided a space for personal growth, but also allowed cadets to connect, network, and understand each other.
And so, the day finally arrived when 𝐿 decided to join a club himself. At the Cube portal, 𝐿 joined the travel club and was greeted by its president,
Han.
He was overjoyed to welcome so many new members from the first year. In fact, when he first received the applications, Han couldn't believe what he was reading. He felt truly blessed with such incredible cadets. Han welcomed them once more and laid out the club's primary goal.
The objective, which sounded quite simple, was to rest. They could access the portal up to 2 times a month to travel outside of Cube.
For their very first orientation, Han announced they would be visiting a nearby location. That location was none other than Seoul, the capital of South Korea. The author organized his thoughts, realizing that a trip to Seoul could be easily managed if they just split into pairs. So far, nothing had deviated from the original novel. 𝐿 reviewed his objective for the day, to intervene in the first major story arc, titled The National Arms Museum.
Once he was there with some of the main characters, 𝐿 planned to manipulate the story from his side.
The club president guided them forward to draw lots. This immediately caught 𝐿's attention, because in the novel, they never formed groups this way. However, it didn't really faze him. This guy didn't care and could just go alone if it came down to it. And then, of all the people he could be paired with, he ended up with 𝐿. 𝐿, being her usual self, coldly insisted that they should just go their separate ways. 𝐿 agreed with that and let her do her own thing. Before leaving,
Yonha shot him a death glare, a face that screamed, "I will kill you if you ever speak so casually to me again."
This was his second strike. Ha-Jin had received his final warning, as Yanya had no plans to spare him a third time.
Our main character simply accepted his fate and moved forward.
The scene shifts to the National Arms Museum, the center stage for the story's first arc. This was the largest gallery of weapon replicas in the entire nation.
Even though it was a remarkable place, Ha-Jin navigated the crowd with zero interest.
He spotted Nayun to his left, who seemed completely obsessed with a particular weapon.
Since Nayun was close, Ha-Jin realized the story's protagonist must also be nearby.
Suho was right at the front, observing a weapon by himself as the novel's main character. Ha-Jin tried to strike up a conversation, asking if he was looking at the seven-branched sword.
He introduced himself at the same time, which made Suho remember who he was.
He clearly recalled him as the sharp-shooting marksman who had joined the travel club. Ha-Yin reflected on Suho's personality. He was written to be strong, handsome, and to have a kind heart.
Normally, it was his own readers who left hate comments for the author, for creating such an unrealistic and cheesy character.
I guess haters are going to hate. Out of the blue, Suho mentioned a nearby gun exhibit, wanting to check it out with Ha-Jin.
Though Ha-Jin agreed, he had a sinking feeling their visit would be cut short by the events fated to unfold.
Suddenly, the entire museum was bathed in red light as an emergency broadcast warned of monsters appearing right outside.
The sudden monster outbreak struck terror into the hearts of every civilian present. Their excitement twisted into horror as a wave of panic sent everyone scrambling for an escape.
People shoved past one another, trampling even children in their desperate frenzy. Amidst the chaos, one person punched through a glass display with their bare hands, stopping everyone in their tracks. The sheer display of power left the entire crowd frozen in place. Even Suho was stunned to see it was noon. She urged everyone to calm down, assuring them the museum's reserve heroes would soon handle the threat.
But in that same moment, she snatched a bow from the display, warning them they'd be living targets if they rushed outside. Her reckless action, however, triggered the security system, trapping them all inside. She told everyone to arm themselves, insisting they needed a way to fight back until the real heroes arrived.
In that instant, Nun sensed a dangerous presence in the distance and braced herself. The man radiated a sinister, crimson energy. His violent aura and twisted face confirmed it. He was a demonic human, the mastermind behind this wicked scheme.
Ha-Jin's memory sparked. This fiend was known as the Dog of Lucius, a villain who played a crucial role in Suho's development. In the original story, the fiend lunged with his claws, ready to strike Noon down.
But while his attention was locked forward, Suho was meant to seize the opening, striking from behind with his seven-branched sword. The blade was supposed to cleave the fiend in two, keeping the main story perfectly on track.
Fate had decreed that Suho would defeat this demon with ease. But for some shocking reason, Suho was sent flying by a devastating blow. The villain landed a catastrophic hit, and his body crashed to the ground, right before Ha-Jin's eyes.
The author's face went blank. He was utterly speechless. This wasn't supposed to happen.
Suho's body lay just few feet from Ha-Jin, who couldn't process what he had just witnessed.
The story he himself had written was never meant to unfold like this. Suho was supposed to win.
And even if he struggled at first,
He possessed the power to utterly annihilate that demonic human. That was what he thought would happen. But it didn't.
Suho's easy defeat sent a chill down Noon's spine as she screamed his name. Coughing up blood, he could barely get to his feet.
Ha-Jin knew his condition was critical. There was no way he had enough time to recover from such a crushing blow.
The fiend stalked toward Suho with menacing energy, preparing to deliver the final strike.
Desperate, 𝐄𝐻 tried to form a plan, rapidly firing arrows straight at the creature's face.
But this beast was a monster. He took the hits head-on, like they were nothing more than a light snack.
Flustered, 𝐄𝐻 fired relentlessly, but nothing worked. He seemed completely invincible to her attacks. Realizing none of her arrows were having any effect, Noon's face fell into despair. Her confidence was shattered. She simply couldn't comprehend what was happening. What's more, the demonic human wasn't even using a special skill or talent to block her arrows. No, he was just tanking the hits with his bare body. His physical stats were simply that overwhelming. Ha-Jin sensed the danger to Noon as the enemy closed in on her. The fiend swiped his claws, aiming directly for her face.
It seemed to be the end for Noon, until Suho leaped back into the fray with a powerful kick to the fiend's head.
He had barely managed to get back up, thanks to Noon. But before their clash could even begin, Suho was blown away again, just managing to block a wave of dark energy with his sword. The fiend then shocked Suho by entering a transformation state.
Shrouding himself in an aura of pure darkness, his power became so overwhelming that Suho was instantly knocked to the ground.
Noon began firing at the fiend's back, desperately trying to delay Suho's impending death.
Turning his attention back to her, the monster unleashed a massive claw attack, slamming Noon into a wall. What Ha-Jin was witnessing was the very definition of a catastrophe. He was horrified by the reality that either one of them could die at any moment. Now, having seen his novel go off script for the second time,
Ha-Jin couldn't understand what was causing the main story to derail so drastically. He booted up his laptop, determined to salvage the situation.
Ha-Jin gathered his bullets with shaken confidence, realizing he probably couldn't even injure the fiend with his mana-infused rounds.
Even if he aimed for a critical hit, it would be an incredible struggle. Nevertheless, because this world was his own creation, Ha-Jin was certain the core settings would never change.
With that knowledge, his fingers danced across the keyboard, modifying the mana bullet's very attributes for his purpose.
He boosted its attack power to 6 points, spending a grand total of 100 story points just for this single alteration. Sliding the magazine back into his gun, Ha-Jin prepared for the coming battle, knowing heroes with versatile skills were key to victory here.
His unique attributes and affinities alone allowed him to ascend to greater heights.
With Suho and the Jin locked in a fierce stalemate, Ha-Jin saw the perfect opening to strike.
Knowing the Jin possessed the dark attribute, Ha-Jin prepared the only element capable of extinguishing shadows.
He yelled Suho's name, warning him to get out of the way, then channeled the light attribute, forging a bullet of pure white.
A single shot found its mark, slamming into the Jin's body and erupting in a blinding flash of azure light.
The bullet didn't just injure, it completely obliterated the Jin's arm, sending waves of agony through the monster.
At the same time, Noon was freed from its clutches, as the dark energy holding her captive simply vanished.
She collapsed to the ground, while Ha-Jin figured he'd done enough.
With the enemy crippled, Suho had more than enough time to end this.
His body trembled from the backlash of his power, but he placed his remaining hope in Suho, trusting the story's true protagonist to deliver the final blow.
Suho charged his weapon, his entire body becoming enveloped in a brilliant blue aura.
He activated the magic power of the Sword Saint, a force capable of wiping out all of existence.
The ultimate slash ended the battle in a single decisive moment, as Suho erased the Jinn with one clean swing. The monster was defeated, its body crumbling to the floor. An exhausted Suho struggled to stay on his feet. Nirn was in a similar state. He rushed to her side, asking if she was all right.
But consumed by sadness and anger, she slapped his hand away. Hajin suggested they just leave her be, knowing her brother would soon arrive to comfort her.
He knew this because it was part of the original story, but his carelessness earned him a shocked stare from both main characters. After all, an extra like him should have no knowledge of their personal lives.
Nguyen's voice wavered as she tried to question him, but her condition worsened, forcing her to stop.
Meanwhile, just outside the museum, the monsters were being annihilated by the vice captain and her twin blades.
Thankfully, the situation outside had been resolved, with every last monster slain. She inquired about the situation inside, and learned that a Jinn had been swiftly eliminated, all thanks to the Cube cadets.
Wanting to know more, she asked for their names. The vice captain was stunned to learn that Noon, Suho, and Hajin were all involved. She immediately dashed towards the museum, her only thought now being to meet Suho. Her excitement grew as she wondered what she would even say to him.
As Hajin was leaving the museum, he ran right into her. Curious, she tried to ask him about Suho's whereabouts.
But Hajin was one step ahead, telling the vice captain that he was still inside the museum.
She headed inside, but was instantly frozen with shock. How could this random cube cadet have known she was looking for Suho in the first place?
Another mistake from our dear author. Later, while resting in a park, he realized he never expected to run into her like that.
He began to wonder, could this mean the story was somehow changing?
To organize his thoughts, Hajin tried to go back to the beginning. He saw himself as nothing more than a mob character, an extra whose current importance was almost non-existent. The story had progressed smoothly so far, so there was no way he could be directly involved in altering its course. But then he hit him. He had forgotten one crucial detail, the fact that this novel had a co-author.
I bet you didn't see that plot twist coming. Hajin explained that this current version of the story was a remake of his original novel.
This version was based on an email he received from a fan at the very beginning of the story. That had to be the reason why events he never planned were now happening in the main storyline. However, if that were true, then all the predictions he'd been relying on were now completely useless. The thought terrified Hajin. He would have no idea what was coming next. He checked his laptop. A message had arrived regarding a critique.
The message stated that the story lacked any real central threat.
This allowed the main character to easily eliminate every enemy and win without a struggle. That kind of development would only bore the readers. And for that reason, from this point forward, every single boss in the story had become significantly more powerful than before. This change would undoubtedly create a chaotic and unpredictable new world. In the aftermath of the incident, their instructor called for both Hajin and Suho to report. He offered a brief explanation of the situation.
refusing to dive into the details. Their health was his utmost priority.
Curious and concerned, Suho asked about Na-Yoon's condition. The instructor revealed she had taken medical leave, temporarily leaving with her family.
He advised them to do the same and head back to the dorms. With that, he left them, giving Suho the chance to confront Ha-Jin as he called out his name.
The blue-haired main character needed answers. He demanded to know why Ha-Jin had said those things to Na-Yoon about her brother. For a moment, Ha-Jin seemed genuinely confused, until the memory of his words came flooding back.
He began to speak, but then recalled the email from his co-author. For some reason, he stopped himself, asking Suho why it mattered so much to him. But the main character was no fool. He was furious that Ha-Jin was playing dumb, dismissing the weight of his words.
Seething with frustration, he decided they would settle this another time.
Now, let's delve deeper into Na-Yoon's background. The author explains that she graduated 4th in her class at the military academy.
She now attends Cube, recognized for her immense talent and her connection to the prestigious Che clan.
She is the daughter of Shin Jung-hak and the younger sister of Che Jin-yoon, names all too familiar to Ha-Jin, who was researching her at that very moment.
What he couldn't grasp was why she reacted so violently when he mentioned her brother's name.
Suddenly, Ha-Jin stumbled upon a news report about Che Jin-yoon's condition. He was in critical health following a monster subjugation mission.
The aftermath left Che Jin-yoon in a deep coma, and the mission that led to his tragic fate was one Ha-Jin knew all too well.
The Flame Devil suppression campaign was supposed to be a milestone event, one that would allow Che Jin-yoon to build his heroic reputation by neutralizing the threat.
This feat would have helped Jin-yoon strengthen his bond with the story's main characters.
Moreover, for young Na-Yoon, the only thing that brought a spark of joy to her eyes was watching her brother succeed as a hero.
But now, the event had been twisted completely, warped beyond the author's wildest imagination. Che Jin-yoon met a tragic end, which became the source of Na-Yoon's deep psychological trauma.
Just then,
He received another email from the system. It stated that any modifications to the plot would now be revealed to Ha-Jin the moment they deviated from the original story.
The system also relayed that Che Jin-yoon,
a key supporter of the protagonist, Kim Suho, had undergone significant changes in this version of the world.
we get a glimpse of what truly happened. The gravely wounded hero was barely conscious after taking a devastating blow.
The co-author had decided that the main character simply had too many allies. That's why they made some necessary changes, to ensure some of them were removed from the board. Poor Che Jin-yoon had to be one of the casualties.
4 years ago, shortly after his first appointment as a hero, Che Jin-yoon had become a Jin seed.
Yes, the truth was far more horrifying than Ha-Jin could have imagined. He never could have predicted a plot twist this monstrous. The scene shifts to Na-Yoon's location. A radio broadcast is reporting on the sudden monster attack that occurred at the National Museum.
The report states that there were 7 fatalities and 50 people injured in the incident.
The heartbroken Na-Yoon couldn't bear to listen and shut the radio off. She sulked in her bed alone until her worried father arrived, calling her name.
Na-Yoon looked up at him, wondering what he was doing here, instead of carrying out his duties.
Shin Jung-hak cared little for his work right now, asking only about her health. Since she was already at the hospital, he wanted her to get a full checkup just in case.
But Na-Yoon insisted she was fine, that nothing was wrong. She tried her best not to worry her father, even thinking he was overreacting by visiting her.
But of course, he was still a worried father.
Na-Yoon relented and asked if she could see 𝐃-𝐸𝐸 just once before she was discharged.
Seeing her fragile state, her father couldn't help but grant his daughter's request.
Let's return to 𝐃-𝐸𝐸's downfall and explore what exactly a Jinn seed is.
Jinns are said to be the most powerful entities in this world, stronger than any devil or human. They possess a unique, terrifying ability to target humans and turn them into Jinn seeds.
Those marked as a Jinn seed undergo an incubation period, a parasitic state where the entity slowly devours its host from within. Before long,
the Jinn seed will completely take over their body, transforming the person into a full-fledged Jinn.
This meant his condition was far worse than anyone knew. One day, he would become a monster.
The incubation typically lasts half a decade before the transformation begins, and 4 long years had already passed since that incident. This meant 𝐃-𝐸𝐸's time was running out. Soon, he would become a Jinn, as his sister makes her way to his room. Hajin contemplates that in a situation like this, there is only one solution.
Before a demon seed fully awakens and devours its human host, the only way to stop a horrific fate is to end their life.
That was the grim task Na-Yoon prepared for, standing over her brother's unconscious body, ready to speak her final words.
Meanwhile, the author knew this was an impossible scenario. There was simply no one in the original story capable of killing Jane before his monstrous transformation.
Even a hardened mercenary would refuse the job.
After all, Jane was slated to inherit his master's power and position, making him a terrifyingly dangerous target.
The demonic awakening also progressed without any physical changes, effectively preventing any outside interference.
The biggest problem was that the demon lurking inside John would be far too powerful, overwhelming, even for the story's main character, Kim Soo-ho.
Jin knew that if the heroes truly tried to stop a demonized Jin,
how many of them would lose their lives against such an overwhelming fiend? To prevent that dark future from ever happening,
Hajin was willing to do whatever it took to stop Jane's transformation, especially since the heroes were vital for the events to come.
As Na-Yoon sat before her brother's still form,
a chill ran down Hajin's spine, a heavy sense of failure washing over him as he realized what must be done.
He would have to be the one to commit the cruel act of taking a life, because it was the only way to prevent an even darker future. Na-Yoon spoke to her brother, recounting the near-death experience she had during that day's monster attack.
She'd never fought such a powerful fiend before, believing no ordinary cadet could have possibly stopped that beast.
Though it pained her to admit it, Na-Yoon recalled it was Hajin, the sharpshooter, who intervened and saved them all.
In the end, she decided not to speak of him, realizing she had overstayed her visit.
Na-Yoon decided to leave, hoping to see her brother again soon. But as she departed, Na-Yoon froze, sensing an ominous dread radiating from her brother. She tried to suppress the memory, but there was no escaping Hajin's words.
With those chillingly cold eyes, he had said things she took as mockery of her situation. Na-Yoon's eyes blazed with fury and determination as she remembered what Hajin had told her.
Let's head to the Tower of Heroes and see what Vice Captain Sangha is up to.
She was viewing unauthorized files alone,
risking her position and potentially landing in serious trouble. Sangha needed to review the records from the museum attack.
This was exactly what worried her assistant, knowing she was breaking the rules.
Regardless, Sangha's investigation revealed that traces of light attribute magic had been detected on the defeated demonized human. That meant whoever was responsible for taking it down had to be a wielder of that very element.
The thought of a light attribute mana user appearing from nowhere thrilled the vice captain. A hero like that would be the ultimate counter to demons.
They were all creatures of darkness, and light mana was their greatest weakness.
Sangha was determined to recruit this mysterious hero, eager to bring in such fresh, powerful talent.
Watching the video files, Sangha recalled that only 3 Cooper cadets were at the museum. That meant one of them had to be the light attribute user.
2 of them were obvious, Suho and Naeun, as they were already on the guild's talent scouting list. But the vice captain was most curious about the 3rd cadet, who was still a complete unknown. To her astonishment, the final cadet was none other than 𝐃𝐚𝐽, the very same boy who had bumped into her at the museum before leaving.
Speaking of our boy, he was busy clacking away on his laptop, much like I am right now.
The author had a sudden, game-changing epiphany. It turned out that no one in this world could even see the laptop he was using.
That's why he could casually browse through the story's plot without worrying about other characters spying on him. As soon as he learned about his invisible laptop, 𝐿 pushed his ability even further, adding another feature.
Instantly, his laptop alerted him to changes within the story.
At the training center, Rachel was absolutely wiping the floor with Damien. She had defeated him nearly 20 times in a row, to the point where he was begging for a new sparring partner. 𝐿's new feature involved detection and alteration.
If anything changed within a 30-meter radius of the original story, 𝐿 would get an immediate alert.
And this would help him identify unusual situations in time. After all, he couldn't just wait for his co-author's messages or discover every detail himself. Using this method, he ensured he'd always be on top of any unexpected developments. But while our boy was celebrating this new feature, he certainly never expected a terrifying, bloodthirsty Naeun to appear from behind.
Burning with anguish and rage, she demanded a sparring match with our boy.
𝐿 stared her down, simply refusing the challenge. Dueling her offered him nothing of value. Naeun immediately called him a coward for backing down, then blamed him for dragging her family into their argument.
The other cadets held their breath, wondering if a battle was about to erupt.
𝐿 explained that he wasn't backing down out of fear, but because of his ammunition. In a training spar, his live rounds could cause a fatal injury, and that was a line he refused to cross. But Naeun only heard this as a sign of arrogance, which only fueled the flames of her anger. The instructor arrived just in time, cutting through the thick tension of their argument.
He roared at Naeun for trying to pick a fight with Cadet 𝐃𝐚𝐽, especially since he was the only one without training-grade weapons.
Considering the incredible risks and potential for injury, 𝐿 was strictly forbidden from sparring with other cadets.
Naeun stormed off in a rage, leaving 𝐿 to a grim realization that it was probably too late for an apology now. As the world's author, he knew what he'd just done was a foolish move, but what's done is done. 𝐿 reminded himself that he had a much darker priority in mind. It was the very reason he'd been training like a man possessed to become stronger,
and the deep bruises on his hands were the proof. That priority was nothing less than killing Na Yun's brother, and for that reason, apologizing to her now felt utterly meaningless.
If he were to get close to her at this point, it would only shatter everything between them later, inflicting an even more cruel betrayal. The scene cuts, moving to a club orientation in another hall.
A crowd of cadets had gathered here. The club president was Yoon-sung, the leader of the Veritas Academic Club.
He laid out their club's primary mission: to conduct in-depth analysis of monsters and specialize in tactical research. Their purpose was to meet and engage in spirited discussions about these very creatures.
While he delivered his orientation speech, many of the cadets were simply mesmerized by his powerful presence and charm.
This captivating figure possessed a unique quality that seemed to command the unwavering attention of everyone in the room.
But it was all just a facade, and the only one who knew the truth was the author. 𝐿 recognized deep down that Yoon-sung was wielding the power of a demon.
His mind flashed back to the first half of the original story, where the academy was the central stage.
A series of terrible events, like disappearing cadets and monster invasions, were all fated to happen at this very location. Orchestrated by this very man.
The club president was actually a cunning monster in human skin, manipulating events from behind the scenes. His pristine appearance was nothing but a deception.
Yoon-sung had forged a pact with the demon Lilith, and in exchange for her enchanting power, he had become a djinn.
Knowing Yoon-sung's true, dark ambitions, 𝐿 knew joining this academic club was a necessity.
Among the cadets, 𝐿 also seemed to be completely unaffected by the president's captivating charm.
The club president decided to show the cadets a sample of their usual routine and how they conducted their analysis. A 3-dimensional hologram of a mid-high tier monster, known as the Ogre Tyrant, materialized on the stage. This monster first appeared shortly after the Outbreak event, which caused the invasion of towers and dungeons in their world.
To this day, it has never been defeated. Yoon-sung emphasized that any information related to higher-tier monsters was both critical and priceless to the Academy.
This data helps them formulate plans to conquer these formidable beasts. Moreover, simply gathering intelligence on a single monster's weakness could be sold for billions.
Yoon-sung playfully decided to single someone out from the audience, asking 𝐿 for her opinion on this creature's weak point.
𝐿 countered that its weakness hadn't even been discovered yet, and she was correct.
But Yoon-sung insisted her opinion would be valued, as this was the sort of fun activity they engaged in at the club.
As a final remark, the president invited them all to an after-party to share their thoughts on the creature's potential weakness. When the speech concluded, 𝐿 approached 𝐿, asking if she was interested in going. In return, he was met with a cold, indifferent shoulder.
He tried again, this time calling out to her just loudly enough to grab her attention.
𝐿 paused, confirming that she would attend the party, since it might help her acquire some useful information.
Recognizing her intent, 𝐿 casually asked if she planned to use that information to lead her guild's future raid team.
That remark finally pierced 𝐿's veil of indifference. The essence of the Straight Guild was a massive power with a rich history.
When monsters first emerged from the gates 50 years ago, it was 𝐿's family who established this guild.
That is why it remains one of the most influential guilds in the entire country. 𝐿 continued to impress and shock 𝐿 with his sharp knowledge of her guild's affairs.
Recently, he began,
the vice leader
has become the guild's center of attention. So much so that he's threatening to usurp the position of the rightful successor, which is you.
𝐿 pressed further, asking if her only goal at the after-party was to gather information. She was growing tired of him beating around the bush.
𝐿𝐻𝐚𝐦 demanded to know what he was getting at. In a shocking turn, 𝐿 presented her with the deal of a lifetime. He was willing to reveal the mountain tyrant's fatal weakness.
His sudden offer left her stunned and utterly speechless.
𝐿 knew this was a necessary gamble. Yanya needed to prove to her guild that she was serious about her work and had what it took to lead them.
𝐿 explained that there was a small blue mark hidden on the monster's heel. Focusing attacks there would paralyze the creature, even if just for a moment. But he quickly added that he wasn't generous enough to give this information away for free. He wanted something from Yanha's guild in return, a precious weapon from their elite armory. The specific weapon he had his eyes on was the Desert Eagle.
This guy was pulling out all the stops, going for a truly legendary prize.
𝐿𝐻𝐚𝐦 questioned if he had any proof of the mountain tyrant's weakness, assuming he must have notes or research to back up his claim.
Hearing this, he just smiled and bluntly confessed that he had none.
It was an absurd thing to admit so casually. Yanha's expression went blank as she realized he was likely a fraud, wasting her valuable time.
Furious, she turned to leave. But 𝐿 called out, warning her that she would regret it if she simply dismissed his advice as a lie.
It was a huge risk. She might not take his words seriously at all. But if she did believe him, he would gain a powerful new ally.
And the funny thing is, as soon as Yonha was out of sight, she contacted one of her guild's executives.
She sent a message to the strike team assigned to take down the mountain tyrant.
Hesitating with embarrassment, she told her team to target the blue spot on the creature's heel, suggesting it might be its weak point.
This confirmed it. Yanya had acted on 𝐿's advice on a whim, even without a shred of evidence.
𝐿 reflected on his gamble. He might have just made a very wise investment, because Yanha was destined to one day become the Spirit King.
𝐾𝐚 then came face to face with his most terrifying villain yet. A loan statement.
That's right. Playtime was over. Our hero was now saddled with a debt of 3 billion won. The pure horror in his eyes said it all. He couldn't even comprehend how much money he owed. He had instantly maxed out the student loan limit.
This made 𝐿 wonder what kind of miserable things the original Chundong had done to need that much cash for himself.
And just like that, his problems had grown even larger.
𝐿 checked his bank account balance and realized he only had 30,000 won to his name. It was just a tiny fraction of the fortune he now owed the academy.
At this rate, our hero had absolutely no chance of ever returning to his own world.
Instead, he'd be trapped here forever, working until his last breath just to pay off this colossal debt. 𝐿 scratched his head, realizing he desperately needed a job. That's a familiar feeling for some of you watching this video, I'm sure.
Now, in this world, there were two ways to make a lot of money, fast.
The author explains that the first method was through the stock market. This guy was trying to become the next Warren Buffett. But there was a catch. Ever since towers and dungeons began appearing around the world, they were typically cleared and conquered by guilds of heroes.
Now, the shares of those guilds were often listed on the stock exchange,
allowing them to be traded widely. 𝐿 knew about all the upcoming listings.
Again, being the author, he knew these things without needing a reason. The real problem was that he needed capital to invest in the first place. This meant stocks were not an immediate option. The second choice was the hunting ground, which 𝐿 believed was his only real path forward for now.
Hunting in this zone was a unique way to earn a living. The hunting ground in question was a dangerous region, teeming with monsters. Unlike normal tower and dungeon events, these areas had a massive variety of different beasts.
You could hunt them down and make a fortune.
It was like taking on quests and then selling the remains of the monsters you've hunted. However, the real obstacle in 𝐿's case was himself.
His personal stats were terrible, just slightly better than an average person. So, in his current state,
his confidence was wavering. He wasn't sure if he could survive a hunt with his current skill set. The author considered that it would be a waste to spend all his story points just to upgrade the basic training pistol he owned.
So, he wanted to find another way to upgrade his weapon, or increase his stats.
Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and a voice called his name, announcing that he had received a package from the cadet 𝐿.
Remembering her name, 𝐿 wondered what this could possibly mean, especially since 𝐿 wasn't the type to reach out to him on her own. Regardless, he opened the door to investigate and found a small, unassuming box.
The cadet opened it and was stunned by its contents. And with that, the scene shifts to the Wonju hunting grounds in Gangwon Province.
𝐿, our main character, stepped through the teleportation gate, arriving for his very first hunting event, dressed in a remarkably clean outfit.
He received a warm welcome from the staff, a stark reminder of the respect cadets commanded wherever they went.
He stepped out of the teleportation station and into the bustling province of Gangwon.
This area, once considered a low-danger zone, had exploded in popularity, attracting adventurers from all over the world and earning the new title of an international metropolis.
A man's desperate shout cut through the noise.
He was searching for a magic user to round out his team before heading into the mountains. The area was filled with people just like him, and 𝐿 calmly moved through the crowd, observing the chaos. He watched as one of the staff members confirmed a team's kill, 3 hobgoblins. Seeing this, 𝐿 realized it would be far more efficient to sell his monster spoils through a brokerage firm to streamline the process.
Just as he started looking for a broker, a man suddenly called out to him from behind.
This man seemed to have sensed 𝐿's goal, asking if he was looking to go on a monster hunt. Our cadet confirmed it, learning that this anxious-looking man was, in fact, a broker, who presented his business card as proof. Still, 𝐿 couldn't shake the feeling of how nervous the man seemed. Then, his eyes fell upon the company name on the card. It was led by none other than Park Soo-hyuk. This man was a major player, destined to one day become Suho's exclusive broker. His nervous exterior clearly hid a masterful skill for recruiting the best of the best.
He was on the path to becoming a top agent for Korea's #1 brokerage firm.
For 𝐿 to encounter him this early in the story was a strange twist of fate. Right now, he was just an inexperienced rookie. That explained Park Soo-hyuk's timid demeanor. 𝐿, intrigued by this opportunity, extended his hand. He was ready to be scouted. In his mind, 𝐿 knew this was only the beginning of the grand story.
So many characters had yet to unlock their true potential and rise to become the legends they were meant to be.
Essentially, he was investing in the future, forging critical relationships ahead of schedule.
A sudden thought struck him. Since this man was fated to be Suho's broker,
𝐿 wondered if poaching him like this was truly the right move to make. A short while later, as they headed towards the monster zone,
𝐿 asked if the broker would be all right traveling alone with him.
We then see the man completely exhausted, looking as if he was about to have a heart attack from the unaccustomed cardio.
It made sense, as a cadet's physical prowess was leagues above that of a normal broker, who usually followed their clients by car. As they neared the danger zone, the broker spotted a set of hobgoblin tracks. Hobgoblins weren't particularly tough, and a pair could earn you around 400 won. A pretty good deal, according to the broker. But for 𝐿, that amount was pocket change. He mused that a single one of his magic bullets cost a staggering 2,001 won.
He needed a much bigger score than a handful of mere goblins.
Setting his sights on a greater prize, 𝐿 pointed towards a boar-like monster below a cliff and asked if that was a viable target.
The broker immediately panicked. That was a steel boar, a monster notorious for its hide, which was completely immune to ordinary bullets.
𝐿 paid his concerns no mind, confidently stepping forward without a word.
The broker was left speechless. From his perspective, the cadet was walking directly to his own doom.
𝐿 simply remarked that he brought a rather decent gun.
This man was essentially saying his weapon could take down anything. More importantly, there was a reason for his absolute confidence.
𝐿 had just received a new gift from Yona in exchange for valuable information. And there it was. He drew the Desert Eagle in all its glory.
This beautiful and deadly firearm was now enhanced with a brand new feature he'd added by spending a few precious story points.
The broker frantically protested, provoking the boar, warning our boy to be careful.
But 𝐿 was feeling bold and paid him no attention.
He locked onto his target and fired a single explosive round. The shot sliced through the beast like a precision laser, felling it in an instant.
The sudden, overwhelming power of the attack sent the broker tumbling to the ground in utter disbelief.
Just then, the system notified him of the special attribute 𝐿 had just unlocked. With every kill he scores using his weapon, its destructive power amplification doubles. Do you have any idea how insane that is?
This guy is going to be completely unstoppable with that ability. 𝐿 was quite satisfied with what he'd accomplished with his new weapon.
Witnessing the special weapon and 𝐿's marksmanship, the broker was utterly impressed.
The boy had no time for compliments, simply aiming at his next target before unleashing a powerful shot.
The broker asked what he killed this time. 𝐿 explained that he'd spotted a black pelican from a distance and decided to shoot it down.
The broker was astonished that he could see that far with such pinpoint accuracy, enough to hit something flying through the air.
𝐿 confidently affirmed his abilities. Joking, he possesses the eyes of a hawk, after all. He told the broker he was heading down the cliff to deal with the monsters.
The broker hastily ran after him. With a black pelican and a steel boar taken down, they had secured 2 high-grade monsters in a row.
𝐿 asked if the man had the means to transport them back safely.
The broker explained it would be convenient to pay a dispatch fee and call the logistics team. He even calculated the budget for how much they'd receive after taxes.
𝐿 was impressed by his meticulous attention to detail, a trait that would soon make this broker famous nationwide.
He confidently shook 𝐿's hand, and both hoped to work together, expanding their partnership in the future.
The broker recalled 𝐿 mentioning this was his first ever hunting experience. Because of that, he wanted to know how the boy would spend his money once he received it.
Like a true businessman, 𝐿 said he would buy stocks, completely shattering the man's expectations with his answer.
The fledgling guild known as Creator's Sacred Grace was originally founded by a jinn, or a devil.
In the original story, they played a massive role.
Sitting in front of his laptop, 𝐿 mused that the guild wasn't the immediate worry, but the upcoming dungeon attack was. In the main story, Creator's Sacred Grace raids the 𝐿'Devassir dungeon.
Right after this raid, the guild's stock price explodes, climbing nearly 1,000%.
That's why he was happily investing his money to buy their stocks early, so he could reap the benefits of the boom later.
After all, it was the easiest and most effective way to make money, thanks to his ability to see the future.
Once he completed the purchase, he wondered, was there anywhere else?
Where could he find more information on stocks? 𝐿 couldn't find much on the internet forums.
So he figured a shady website like Violet Banquet might be more useful. Thinking back, 𝐿 remembered something.
He recalled the Chameleon Troupe, the masked organization that becomes the main villain in the latter half of the story.
Just as their name implies, they were a criminal organization with little information on its members. However, as the novel's author, he knew their exact identities and hideouts. 𝐿 figured he was likely the only person in the world who knew about them.
Although these guys were vile criminals themselves, they despised djinns as if they were something even worse.
𝐿 wondered if he could build a relationship with the leader of the Chameleon Troupe.
This could somehow help him take down 𝐃𝐞𝐚𝐦 one day when he is revived as a djinn.
Weighing his options, 𝐿 believed the organization must have a vacant position, meaning he had a chance to make his move.
As he was searching, his laptop screen suddenly went black, surprising 𝐾𝐚 and making him lean in with worry.
This was a terrible thing to happen to him. The laptop was his only link back to his old world.
Losing it would set him back immensely. Fortunately, it turned back on, allowing him to breathe a sigh of relief.
A month had passed since he arrived in this world. The laptop was receiving a sudden update. He got hit with a Microsoft update and nearly collapsed, thinking he was about to lose all his work. Anyway, on to another scene. At a restaurant, a couple sitting alone was drawing everyone's attention. It was the indifferent 𝐃𝐚𝐚 and the cheerful 𝑒𝐻𝐸𝐸.
𝐃𝐚𝐚 started the conversation by expressing his annoyance. He had no desire to participate in these prim and proper gatherings.
𝑒𝐻𝐸𝐸 teased him, thinking he only stood to gain from this meeting. After all, he was talking to the person destined to lead society one day. She asked about his grades and learned he was only doing okay.
𝐿 poked fun at him for not trying to get first place.
But the thing is, 𝐃𝐚𝐚 believed his grades were just okay because he was ranked second. This guy was winning, yet held incredibly high standards for himself. Interrupting their meeting was an uninvited guest. It was the radiant Rachel, the one 𝐃𝐚𝐚 had a secret crush on.
This guy literally shot up from his seat, and his entire personality shifted just to get her attention.
Seeing him leap up with such interest completely soured 𝐿𝐻𝐸𝐸's mood, especially since she actually liked him. Jonghyuk, meanwhile, checked on 𝐿, asking if she was okay. 𝐿 insisted she was fine, but as they bickered, 𝐿𝐻𝐸𝐸 grew more irritated at being ignored. But then, 𝐿 suddenly mentioned the name Kim Ha-jin, instantly grabbing 𝐿𝐻𝐸𝐸's attention. She turned to 𝐿, demanding to know more about him.
The girl explained that during the djinn incident at the National Museum, there were only 3 cadets, and one of them just happened to be 𝐿.
The djinn had overwhelmed them, beating both Suho and 𝐿 so badly that victory seemed impossible, until someone unexpectedly intervened.
With a single shot, 𝐃𝐞𝐚𝐿 had shattered the Jin's arm, and Naeun was there to witness the unbelievable event. She just couldn't believe he'd managed to do that with a mere training pistol. It made her question what his true motives were. While Yeonja was lost in thought, Naeun decided to press her for information.
She wanted to know what Yu Yanha thought of the guy, especially since they were on the same team during the first training exercise.
The girl answered hesitantly. It turns out she'd already investigated 𝐃𝐞𝐚𝐿's background due to her own suspicions. She learned he was just an orphan who joined the Cube, burdened by a massive debt of 300 million. But aside from that basic info, she hadn't uncovered anything particularly shocking about him. What's more, she couldn't figure out how he knew the mountain tyrant's weakness.
Something that even the top researchers and analysts were unaware of at the time.
Yeonha recalled trying to ask him how he knew, but he had been stubborn, refusing to explain any further. That's why she wanted to investigate him, believing he could one day become a useful asset for her guild. Yeonha admitted that she initially thought he was completely unremarkable. She focused her thoughts, reasoning that his attacks during training weren't nearly powerful enough to blow off a Jin's arm so easily. So, based on that information alone, she deduced that he must be hiding a secret trump card from everyone else. Naeun then whispered a chilling suggestion that 𝐃𝐞𝐚𝐿 might actually be a Jin himself. The idea left both Jong-hak and Yeonha stunned into silence. Even the purple-haired boy found it hard to believe that one Jin would kill another so effortlessly. Naeun couldn't put her finger on it, but she knew something felt deeply wrong about 𝐃𝐞𝐚𝐿. Meanwhile, Hajin's laptop was acting strangely, its update nearing 100%. Suddenly, he felt a searing heat emanate from his wrist. The pain intensified, and blood began to seep through his sleeve. Hajin panicked as his wrist burned with excruciating agony. The latest update was forging a stigma, representing the power of the Creator. Every time he increased his influence, and his story point grade evolved, his stigma would evolve along with it. The magic contained within it could be used whenever needed, and after a single use, it would recover in 24 hours. Hajin was hit with a splitting headache as aches racked his entire body. It felt as if information was being forcibly poured into his brain, with no way to resist. Back at the restaurant, Jong-hak slammed his hand on the table. Who furious that Naeun was still so upset over Hajin's recent actions. At that same moment, Hajin could barely stay on his feet, collapsing to the ground. Back with Naeun, she couldn't stop replaying the cruel words 𝐃𝐞𝐚𝐿 had said to her. Naeun declared firmly that she truly didn't like him at all. Hajin lay unconscious, his body having given up, as we see the stigma he received from the update. His laptop displayed a sudden notification for him. A new ability had been added to his observation and reading gift, enhancing its effects. It urged him to go to the Tower of the Association in Suwon. You see, right after the incident at the National Museum, Suho, Naeun, and Hajin received certificates of merit for their heroic actions. Their efforts were recognized for their service to the city. 𝐃𝐞𝐚𝐿's wrist was still throbbing from what happened the day before. He felt better, but the pain was a constant reminder. Moreover, he still hadn't figured out what its purpose was. Unfortunately, Hajin had to sit next to Naeun, who was fuming at him, telling him to shut up, even when he hadn't said a word. Naeun was so annoyed by his very existence that she couldn't stand having him near. Hajin curiously asked if she had already forgotten what he did. He then reminded her that on that very day,
He had saved her damn life with his power. Naeun was furious to hear this from him, but he wasn't wrong. She lashed out, forcing Suho to step in and stop their argument.
He even offered to switch seats with Naeun to help her, but the stubborn girl refused to do that either.
After some bickering, she finally switched with Suho, who sat next to 𝐿 and prepared to talk.
He thanked 𝐃𝐚 for saving their lives, something our main character clearly never expected them to admit.
It was confirmed that without his intervention, they would have lost the battle. He became their unexpected savior, earning their deepest gratitude.
But our guy is a calm and collected one. He figured they could have won even without him stepping in.
See, if 𝐿 hadn't been there to save them, Suho would have likely unleashed his main character, aura, and evolved to a higher power level, just to crush the threat.
After all, that's the whole point of being a protagonist in these stories.
Whenever they face true danger, they always rise to the occasion and grow even stronger.
The scene shifts to an auditorium where one of the world's most distinguished heroes is making his entrance.
Dressed in a striking, dragon-themed outfit with long, flowing hair, the man walked with an air of confident indifference, commenting on how useless the current mission was.
This man is 𝐿, a top-tier hero ranked number 30 in the association. Before his overwhelming presence, the entire crowd fell silent.
Everyone could feel the immense aura radiating from his very being. This marked the beginning of the award ceremony, where Naeun, Suho, and our main character, 𝐿, were all waiting. The awardees were called to the stage.
These 3 cadets were chosen for their honorable actions in service to the city.
The award was to be presented by 𝐿 himself, one of the most notable heroes in the association.
It was all to honor the cadets for their outstanding performance in eliminating the demonic threat and saving countless innocent lives.
First, 𝐿 called upon Suho and presented him with his award.
He saw the raw potential in Suho's power, remarking that he was a talent worth recruiting.